Back on June 24th, 1996, someone by the name of Ryu Fujisaki debuted a manga known as Houshin Engi. Nowadays, it is considered to be a hidden gem in regards to Shonen Jump. While in Japan, it would be a few years before Studio Dean would begin production of an adaptation series in the form of Senkaiden Houshin Engi. Now, the show itself would begin to air on TV Tokyo in July 3rd, 1999, with the final episode airing on December 25th of the same year. However, we are not going to be talking about the series in its entirety. Instead, we are going to have a more in-depth look at the antagonist of that adaptation, So Dakki. Now, I know this channel is more known for covering decades-old technology and video games, but at the same time, I have dropped reference to this character in many ways possible, from various thumbnails to aliases to running a side channel basically. Not to mention that there aren't very many videos regarding this 1999 adaptation nor the character herself, so you bet my enthusiastic ass is going to be making a video about this character, a character that some would either like because of her charm or just want to shove 4,000 pitchforks up her. I do want to note that since this is an in-depth video about Dakki, expect some spoilers, so I recommend either reading the manga and or watching the 1999 anime before you continue watching this video, or at least pay attention to the warning text on screen. In summary, Houshin Engi takes place in a universe that mashes up ancient China and the futuristic Seinen world, a world that exists a group of powerful immortals known as the Seinen, who carried extraordinary abilities and knowledge. Now, while the Seinen are considered to be a generalized term, female Senins are referred to as Senyos. In Dakki's case, she is considered a yokai senyo, described as an evil vixen fox spirit who overtakes the bodies of women in the human world, who would go by many names as evidenced in Manga Volume 6. Prior to the events of Houshin Engi, she went by various names like Oshi. As Oshi, she was the wife of the 20th Emperor of the Yin Dynasty, before she was eventually defeated by Bunchu, who is one of her rivals and also one of the three strongest of Kingo Island, herself included. Now, fast forward to many decades after rest and further training, her two sworn sisters, Kokibi and Okujin, found a new body to take over. That would be in the form of So Dakki, the daughter of Sogo. Chuo, who was the benevolent but at times ruthless Emperor of the Yin Dynasty, demanded Dakki to be presented, to be the new wife, otherwise Kishu would be destroyed. The original Dakki was eventually presented and was willing to sacrifice her personal happiness for the sake of her country. But little did she know that those two sworn sisters showed up as makeup artists. They would be giving her her first and last makeover, however, as she was essentially killed and her identity was eventually taken over by the yokai senyo. And thus, Dakki's reign of terror as the Empress begins there. The most common appearance that many might be familiar with would be in the manga. In general, Dakki has long hair that is split halfway past her knees while having parted bangs. She also wears a leotard with leg wear and detached sleeves combined with fingerless gloves. Now, if you're asking about the large shoes that she wears, it is a common design choice with most characters in Houshin Engi. What makes her design more distinct would be her signature eyelashes and the facial marks seen on her forehead. Before the identity theft, however, the original Dakki had regular brown hair while Oshi had short hair. But the thing is, what people may remember Dakki for is her avant-garde fashion. Throughout the entire manga series, Dakki can be seen sporting a whole bucket list of outfits, which can be one of those things that made Dakki's character more interesting. However, just like her outfits, Dakki's hair color never stayed consistent. And that brings me to my most favorite version, but also the most underrated version of Dakki. In 1999, Studio Dean produced an adaptation titled Senkaiden Houshin Engi, also known as Soul Hunter when it got released in the United States in 2001 by ADB Films. During production, however, there were some rewrites to the story, as the manga had not reached its conclusion until 2000, while a good chunk of the character designs were tweaked and some characters which contributed to the manga storyline became absent during production. Apparently, Dakki herself became one of those design tweaks, as she now had orange-ish red hair, and wearing a more modest outfit compared to her more provocative appearance of the manga. I assume this was done to at least appeal to the wider audience in Japan's strict TV guidelines, so I'm not too sure. But I will say the red hair wasn't entirely new, at least because of the fact that we had some manga artwork that had Dakki with red hair, but in most cases Dakki had pink hair. While most of her outfits seemingly retained parts of the original outfit like the leotard and leg wear, it can be looked at as wearing a bodysuit due to the light blue added into her upper thighs. My favorite part outside the hair color would be the consistent use of shoulder pads, as it would usually add to her royalty-like design, and because shoulder pads in anime characters are very cool. I like it. Now, outside of the hair color change, her eye color would be changed from blue to red. Her avant-garde fashion can be a bit less. Outside of her main outfit, she can be seen wearing a similar looking outfit but in latex, colored in black and red, while also wearing a jester-like hat as well. Then she had a party outfit in episode 3, while also being seen as an office worker in episodes 9 and 11, albeit in teal and blue respectively. In episode 11, however, she was wearing a longer skirt. Then there is her most weirdest outfit came in the final episode where she was wearing booba tassels, sported purple lipstick, and had these weird looking paws in her arms. Senkaiden isn't without its errors, however. In some cases, Dakki's common outfit had the neck brace go from purple to white, and the bottom part of her leotard had some unique shape to it, but in some parts it made it look like an average leotard. The inconsistencies not only happened to her main outfit, but so did her alternative outfit as well, though only in trading cards where she only had fingerless gloves instead of the full black latex gloves seen in the anime. One more error that was made, but it was only in supplemental materials, would be the side of her hat shown here. Seeing her with that is very rare and kind of forgivable in my honest opinion. One more common trait is that in some scenes, Dakki's hair color goes from orange-ish red to just having full red hair. Episode 6 in the flashback scene in episode 7, and even episode 19 and 20 are practically good comparisons. However, the red-haired Dakki wasn't entirely exclusive to the 1999 anime and in some artworks from the manga, as some games under the Senkaiden name for consoles like the Sony PlayStation, Game Boy Color, and the WonderSwan kept the hair color, even if they just recolored some artwork seen from the manga. Fast forward to 2018 with Houshin Engi getting its second adaptation, Dakki would return to having pink hair, and likely to stay that way as far as time can tell. At first glance, Dakki has a more playful personality, and the flirty kind. In the manga, every time she speaks, it shows a different font with each sentence ending with a heart. But then, her true colors are that of a bitch in sheep's clothing. She enjoys other people's torment and has a thing for building torture devices. Dakki also has good acting skills and knowledge of human psychology as well. The funny part to me is that in some scenes, she would be seen with things like a satellite antenna with her name on it. And funny enough, she is also a gamer before many of us were. If the Yin Dynasty had esports, she would be winning tournaments. In all honesty, I do think the anime adaptations do a very good job of capturing her personality. In the 1999 anime, that would be all thanks to Yumi Kakazu, who is better known for voicing Anzu Mazaki from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Shizuka Minimoto from Doraemon.
いい感じですって。当然よね。中王様、長い間陰王朝のために尽くしてくれて。
In the English dub, however, she was voiced by Claire Hamilton.
Who needs to play a silly game with pixelated blood and guts when the real thing is so much more satisfying?
Anyway, in the 1996 manga, Dakki's character would be more complex, while in the anime she was pretty much an evildoer, full-blown evildoer at that. Now, what I'm leaving out of my Now, without any whereabouts of what happened to the original Dakki, many would see that she went from being sweet and gentle to becoming an evil seductress who has the emperor as a puppet, and leaving the Yin dynasty to ruin through high taxation and famine. Here are the events that remained consistent-ish between the manga and the 1999 anime. In episode 1, a resident was pleading to lower the taxes due to high death toll rates, only for Dakki to refuse, claiming that they won't live in luxury anymore. In the manga, however, she called him stupid and stated that they can just eat junk food like candy instead. This prompted an assassination attempt, but failed miserably as he was instantly killed by Dakki with a beam, or by one of her servants in the manga. And it was by that point that objecting to these policies would lead to execution. In episode 3, Dakki threw a party with the 4 great lords, only for them to criticize the current state of the Yin dynasty. This led to them getting executed with the exception of Shoki, who was talked out of execution by Kohiko. Sho ended up getting imprisoned instead. By episodes 4 and 5, however, Ki Hakoyuko joined the Yin dynasty in hopes to save his father. But this is where it gets more different between all plots. In the manga, Hakoyuko was executed after one of the gifts attempted to attack Dakki. In Senkaiden, he was executed after getting framed into attacking Dakki. In the 2018 anime, however, he was killed by Dakki herself, since he was able to withstand her temptation. The only consistent part between the three was Hakoyuko becoming mincemeat and fed to his imprisoned father. This would take a toll on him and would pretty much starve himself to death throughout the series. Episodes 7 to 9 targets Chuo's original wife, Kyohi, who was framed and imprisoned for supposedly orchestrating an assassination attempt. Not to mention that this scenario became more suspicious when Kohiko asked to interrogate the assassin, only to find out that he died in his cell, supposedly. To make matters worse, Kohiko's wife, Kashi, and sister Koshi were tricked into an encounter with the crazed emperor, and both would soon game in after standing up against the two. By episode 9, Dakki and the former empress would have an encounter, and Kyohi straight away called her filth without any hesitation. Of course, this led to Dakki breaking down in tears, but it wasn't very long before the Grammy Award winner Dakki gifted her a magic dagger, which apparently forced her to pick it up, but that was not long before Kohiko picked a fight with Chuo, which was eventually stopped after Bunchu intervened. Right as Chuo ordered them to hand over the two princes, Inchan and Inchi, it was revealed that they abandoned their homes and are on the run, but not long before Dakki screamed at Kyohi holding a dagger. Kyohi, unable to run away from this, she protected her honor and... From my understanding, it seemed like Kyohi had more screen time compared to that of the manga, but it's interesting nonetheless. Episodes 10 and onward gave Dakki less screen time, with more focus towards the main characters and their adventures. But during these screen times, Dakki had been transforming the Emperor into a giant abomination, which was unleashed by episode 18. Episodes 19 and 20 saw the complete destruction of the Yin Empire, with Dakki using the Bankohan, a Paopeis that manipulates gravity. While the main characters would successfully seal the Sworn Sisters, they also attempted to snap the Emperor out of it. Of course, this ended with the remaining prince getting killed, and the Emperor eventually attempted to kill Dakki, but she ended up killing him with that beam coming from that rather tall Paopeis you call a hat. Eventually, her evil doings stopped by episode 21, when a enraged Bunchu used the Bankohan on her and it was eventually sealed. Since Dakki is a Senyo, a rather strong one at that, she often uses multiple Paopeis, like the Keisei Ginjo, a light purple shawl or veil that leaves a scent which allows her to capitate those around her. Almost all the time she is seen with it, and can be rare to see her without it. And yes, her tall hat is a defensive Paopeis called the Kenkabao. It was apparently used twice in the anime, and the second use of this Paopeis was apparently powerful enough that it got destroyed as well, which is probably why she was seen without it in episode 21. And then finally, she also has the Gogashikino, a fan that creates a shockwave of air pressure that is pretty much demonstrated in episode 20. As said earlier, in episode 19 of the 1999 anime, she utilized a Bankohan, which involves gravity manipulation, using it against Bunchu and then on her as well. While not exactly Dakki, there is a main character and ally of Taikobo named Yuzin, who had shape-shifting abilities and was able to shapeshift into Dakki herself, as evidenced in episode 8. Now, as evil as Dakki was, and her evil doings can be unforgivable, she appeared to have her own redemption arc, and that earned her name as a heroine in the process. In the manga, which is considered canon, Dakki worked for a higher power named Yoka, with the goal for power, but she later discovered the Ancients and how they fused with the planet. This led to a deeply affected Dakki forging her own secret intentions of fusing with Yoka's body in order to become part of the Earth, as a cosmic mother figure. However, despite her evil doings and her feud with Taikobo, who eventually fused with Tinkun to become Fuki, she managed to save him in the end. Now, despite her redemption towards the end, the actions that she caused left in some consequences and some questioning if she really should have been forgiven. The fact of the matter is, she put the Yin dynasty at ruin, driven the emperor into insanity before being abandoned, or in the anime transformed to a giant creature just to wreak havoc only for Dakki to kill him in the end. You also gotta add in that she made Shoki's son into mincemeat. Those damages were irreversible, and she somehow got away with it in the end. Well, except for the 1999 anime itself. Here's the thing, I love her design to death, to the point that I prefer it over the original manga, but she was made out to be a full-fledged villainess, with no redemption whatsoever. Just like Chuo, who became Dakki's puppet, it was revealed towards the end that even Dakki herself was a barely subconscious doll, as part of a scheme orchestrated by none other than Genshin Tensei, meant to manipulate historical events. Eventually, by episode 21, Dakki was sealed, but in episode 24, she was found by Bunchu in a pod, which leads us to the final episode where she gained a will of her own, and went berserk until she was killed by a combination of Bunchu, Shinkoryo, and with the final blow by Taikobo himself. Of course, it is no surprise that Dakki gained a somewhat niche fanbase, just like with how people grew a liking towards main characters like Taikobo, Yuzin, and even Shinkoryo. But despite most of the characters being just male characters, it is Dakki, her sisters, Tosenyoku, and Ryukutsu Koshu who are considered to be more prominent female characters in Houshin Engi. But unlike the other female characters, Dakki is a seductress who loves to tempt people with her charm, so she fits in really well in the fanservice category. And I mean, her fanservice was unleashed in a number of ways. In the anime, the fanservice is kinda rare, but it's more evident in merchandise. One example would be in the form of Card-Ass Masters trading cards. Dakki would have some of her own, but the craziest of them all would have to be a set of cards showing the group of characters, with one of the cards on it just showing her whole bakery. Damn. Outside of trading cards, while the main characters had their own figures with questionable quality, Dakki herself was the only character to receive a garage kit in February 2000, courtesy of Kotobukiya. This one is considered to be my most favorite piece of Dakki merch that I finally got my hands on. But sadly, my anxious ass can't be bothered to assemble it just yet. I'm just new to this whole resin garage kit scene, so I need to take the time into learning how all this stuff works, before I eventually go through the trouble of putting it together. Following the 2018 anime, she also saw more merch as well, both from Ben Presto and Kotobukiya as well. Dakki, when it comes to fan art, doesn't appear as often, and even if there was, they were likely lost to time, and practically obscured to recover through places like the Wayback Machine. In most cases, the manga version was more likely to receive fan art than the 1999 version, which to me feels criminal. I assume it might have been because how her character was perceived as a typical anime villain, but I really adore her design so much, and I use that as motivation to get into digital art more casually. Not to mention that the number of times I've attempted to make 3D models out of her, which eventually succeeded in November 2000. 2024. Like I said, it's a shame that she doesn't get as much fan art, and it's kinda telling when most of the recent stuff is just basically AI generated content with inconsistencies that are so bad that it makes the 1999 anime look polished in comparison. Well, there you have it. I hope this video is enough to provide information and insight of this rather underrated villainess of Shonen Jump. Granted, some grew a liking to her or always had a belief that villains are hotter than the heroes, but there are some that really hate her guts thanks to her crimes against humanity. Love her or hate her, I feel like her character was interesting. So much so that I ended up having a channel dedicated to Dakkiposting. As a VTuber who mostly makes videos about games and technology, I think it was a case of if nobody was going to do a video, then I will. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. What are your thoughts on Dakki? I want to hear about it in the comment section down below. This Patreon's vocal shout out goes to Kuji. Thank you as always. And as always, thank you all for watching and peace out. See ya.